everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino's Security Confidential. Today, we are honored to have Nick York join us. Nick York is a lawyer, entrepreneur, and strategic business advisor for businesses ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies, universities, and national nonprofit organizations. In addition to a successful legal career, Nick has been an owner, investor, and director of several companies, including his holding company, COSE Enterprises, LLC, and as co-founder of Transom Group, a technology and industrial automation consultancy doing business in the U.S. and Latin America. Nick's 25-plus year career has been centered around business, technology, and public policy, which led him to his current role as co-founder and president of the Ohio IT Association, Ohio's premier statewide trade association serving the interests of tech and tech-enabled companies and leaders throughout the state. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Yeah, Manoj,
appreciate you being here. Yeah, we look forward to this conversation because as a small business in Ohio, that's how we got introduced to you, and we're fortunate enough to be a part of OITA. But I think the work that's being done the story needs to be told, and it might be helpful to a lot of other businesses.
I appreciate that. So the Ohio IT Association is an independent nonprofit, nonpartisan statewide organization that's really focused on Ohio's technology-driven companies and industry professionals and operating at what I call the intersection of business, technology, and public policy. We focus on kind of 5 key objectives. That's industry promotion, getting out there and talking about what great things are happening. Advocacy, which is government relations and advocating for certain public policies to help tech and tech-enabled companies advance. Business-to-business engagement, getting companies together and connecting them in a networking type of thing. Professional development, which, just again, whether it's a group of CIOs or a group of CTOs, a group of software developers, whatever it might be, connecting them and trying to create platforms for them to connect, not just in their particular region or their city, but around the state. And then finally, a critically important one is the ubiquitous talent attraction and development. And while we don't try to reinvent the wheel with a lot of other great tech associations or workforce development groups, we do try to highlight what Ohio is doing from a talent standpoint, ultimately to make it a stronger ecosystem and attract more people and retain more people here so that we can help advance the state as we go forward.
We're headquartered out of Dublin, Ohio, but Columbus and Dublin have become quite the Columbus region, I should say, has become quite a mecca for startup companies.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of them that have come up. We had Nick Potts on the show, who is the CEO of Gift Health, and he's been able to attract a lot of attention, both from his past ventures and his current, and we're seeing other companies like UpDocs just got acquired. Another startup operation, Bold Penguin, got acquired. So it seems to somehow, when you think of Ohio, you don't think technology startups. But do you?
Yeah,
have you seen that?
I've seen that. I mean, Columbus is obviously a terrific example. There's no doubt about that. But I see it, throughout the state. One of the I guess pleasures of what I get to do is I get to travel around the state a little bit and see these opportunities, burgeoning up. Whether it's in the 3 Cs, Cleveland, Columbus, or Cincinnati, or really in Northwest Ohio, in the Toledo area, or some of the even more rural areas, or down in Southeast Ohio in Athens and Ohio University, and things that are coming out of those things. So it's really rewarding to get to see those type of young companies that are starting out, young entrepreneurs. I'm an old entrepreneur now, but young at heart, and to see that, and that's again a role that we're trying to play as OITA is how can we help foster that, right? And whether that's connecting people, whether that's providing introductions for access to capital, whether it's just helping good mentoring and trying to keep people from making the mistakes that many of us maybe have made along our way, to help them get to success a little bit quicker. It's an exciting for Ohio, and it's an honor for me to get to travel around the state and do more of that.
Now, Nick, recently you had an event online with the state of Ohio, where you had the CIO from the state join and discuss. Were there any insights regarding technology in Ohio and with the state that came out of that?
Sure.
That
Well, here's what I would say. I think the DeWine Husted administration, Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted, and their team on the technology side, or the state CIO, Ervan Rodgers, who you mentioned, they've done a really good job, I think, of trying to identify, technology needs, looking at advancements, setting up organizations within the state government or sort of the public-private sector partnerships to really better understand what the state needs in terms of technology and how the state can play a role not only in advancing technology needs with state agencies, but also helping the private sector. So for instance, you've got Innovate Ohio, which is led by the Lieutenant Governor. They're doing things from a user experience standpoint with state government agencies, but also looking at, they've got their Cyber Ohio initiative, looking at how do you help both public and private sector entities better deal with cybersecurity threats. You've got things around broadband access and the infrastructure that's going to be needed, as we continue to grow and trying to address the digital divide issues that are, everywhere in the country, and Ohio the same, both rural and urban areas. So I would give credit to the state in terms of thinking about what the challenges are and how the state can play a role. Obviously, there's a lot to do, but it's good to have leadership that recognizes the value of technology and the need to invest in that and invest in the companies and the public policies that are needed to be successful.
You mentioned Innovate Ohio. Is Innovate Ohio a program which is more about guidance, or is it also make funding and make some policy changes that enable a much healthier technology environment?
So it started off, I believe that the impetus was how are we going to make technology more effective for the state agencies? And if you think about it, obviously there are we interact with the state more than most people might think. If you think about the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, if you think about unemployment, if you think about Job and Family Services for other folks in disadvantaged areas, maybe it's Medicaid. So there's a lot of things that the state touches on that we're involved in. Technology is playing a role. So the first thing that Innovate Ohio really set out to do was how do we provide a better user experience within state government, to provide those services to its citizens, so that there's, it's more efficient, it's more effective. You're ultimately providing those services in a more, advanced way. One of the things that they've continued to do, though, in addition to that, is really think outside of just state government and how can the government play a role in helping to advance private sector advances in use of technology. So, the Innovate Ohio board, the advisory board, is made up of folks from the private sector, from the public sector, everything from big and small companies to universities, et cetera, and really has a mission, I think, long term, of really trying to set Ohio apart from an innovation standpoint. And how do what we do at OITA is try to foster a business environment or an environment overall for more technology use and adoption. I think Ohio is really leading the way with Innovate Ohio and some of the initiatives coming out of that program.
Is there a particular agency in the state that you think might be ahead of the curve, if you will, in terms of adoption and dissemination of technology to the citizens?
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't single one out. I think that obviously with COVID, right, one of the things that we saw with COVID over this past year is from a public health standpoint and sort of the immediacy that was required. And the ability for Ervan Rodgers as the state CIO to kind of marshal the forces that were necessary to have a coordinated effort to figure out how are we going to respond to this, because obviously there was a health issue at first, but then there was just the goods and services that needed to be provided in a new kind of remote or online way that we didn't have to do in the past. And I would give them a lot of credit for thinking holistically about this and trying to integrate the various agencies into it. So obviously from the public health standpoint, whether it was the contact tracing initiatives or some of those things, it was really leading the way over this past year. But I think what that did is it opened the eyes and opened what I'd call the opportunities. And something people think of that as a challenge or a problem, and I think of it as an opportunity to really improve. And I would give credit to the state of forward thinking and really jumping in with both feet, so to speak, in terms of how we're going to solve these problems.
Now, outside of healthcare, that's a great example. A couple episodes back, we had Shanoa Moss on the show, and Shanoa is in the healthcare IT business, and she actually mentioned that COVID has led to a tremendous amount of innovation on the part of some very large healthcare organizations in the state of Ohio, which was surprising to me because you don't think large and innovation
right.
don't go together. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron. But she mentioned that, and from what you're describing, it looks like the state of Ohio team here also put a great deal of focus on that and marshaling resources, and that may have been a catalyst for that.
Yeah, for sure. Again, nobody would to wish upon anyone that the effects of COVID or having to go through what we've had to go through. But I do think if you want to call it the silver lining of it, was really to open the eyes to all of us in terms of where some of the deficiencies we might have and where opportunities exist to really, and the impetus really to advance that technology. A lot of times, especially at a state government level, everyone knows that government moves a little bit slower than business, and that's by design, and that's intentional, and that's not a bad thing in many instances. But in situations like with COVID, where you had to have kind of a rapid response, and there were a lot of different moving parts, I think what it did is it helped advance the use of technology in the state, and will set a platform or a foundation for moving forward, and hopefully to continue to advance that technology adoption.
Now, Nick, switching gears here a little bit to OITA itself, what's the origins of the organization? What drove you to, from attorney to entrepreneur in industrial systems, to start creating an IT association?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I think what we realized a couple years ago, and I had operated, at what I call the intersection of, business technology and public policy for most of my career, right? Whether it was my legal practice or doing some government-related work in that practice, and obviously having a couple of technology businesses now. And there were a number of people, many of whom were in Columbus, and they were from large organizations, and realized that looked around the room during a couple of different incidences where there was a need for an association, and you look in Columbus, and there's an association for just about everything, right? I mean, people know the manufacturers and the retailers and the doctors and the lawyers, but there's also there's a group for the bakers and the candlestick makers and the whole thing, but unbelievably, okay, there was not one for the tech industry. There are a lot of great regional tech associations around the state, but there was not 2 years ago, when we really put this into practice in earnest, a statewide association. So that origin really was, and as we've developed, really a member-led effort, right? There were a number of ultimately now members of the OITA who were looking for that representation, that a trade association, for lack of a better term, who could come in and help with a number of these initiatives and public policy focus areas that they needed help with, and we were able to do that. We marshaled a lot of good people from the business community, big and small companies, as I mentioned, and we've got a terrific advisory board, which you serve on and know. But then it expanded that, and we're beyond just the businesses to universities, community colleges, economic development groups from around the state, other tech associations. The thing we did not want to do is, reinvent the wheel or step on the toes of all the good things that people were already doing, but really find a way that we could help be a platform and convene and connect and collaborate, as I use all the time, from a statewide perspective. So the origins were humble origins, really born out of need and necessity, and driven by the members, and that's how we continue to be driven today by our members.
Well, I hope one area that the members are pushing in, and I'll just speak for Dark Rhino Security, is in procurement. I mean, we've what's the best way to put this? We've banged our head against a wall is probably the best description in trying to do business with the state. It seems like an arduous task, and quite honestly, it seems like the deck is stacked against us. Every RFP that comes out, it seems like it's preordained to go to somebody, right? And it's not us, I can tell you that. So it would be good if there's such a great push like you're describing at the state level, and the leadership of Governor DeWine is recognizing that, to give small businesses a chance, which is where the engines of innovation. And it would be nice to be able to showcase that in the state environment itself.
Yeah, well, and taking that out of the Dark Rhino in particular, because I know you guys have a lot to offer and could be a good partner, there's no doubt. But taking a step back and looking at it from a procurement process, it's one of the things that as an organization we're focused on. We have a procurement committee, which has been tasked with the role of coming up with recommendations that we can share with state leaders and help them to better understand, especially from a technology side. Manoj, I think part of the issue is that government is different than the private sector, and intentionally so. And what you want to do is you want to have certain protections for transparency and all those kind of things in a public contract. So that has its complexities and challenges for sure. The other thing from a procurement standpoint from the state, and technology is advancing so quickly, right? I mean, if you look at sort of the AstroTeller graph, and how quickly that we're advancing, as a society, and government policies and programs really have been designed, on a kind of one size fits all in many instances. In other words, you're going through a procurement process the same as you'd use to buy pencils and paper or engineering consulting services, but you're applying it to technology. And one of the things as an organization that we've tried to push is, sometimes you have to think a little bit differently, that one size does not fit all, and that, that you have to get the state to operate at the speed of business, right? And I think that, with COVID and other things that have happened recently, that's never been more clear. And so one of the things that we look at from a procurement process is really trying to help, the state think about ways that it can improve that process, and be more responsive to, companies large and small, and to try to find ways that you can be more adaptive and adoptive of new innovative approaches to providing technology. And I would say that, again, working closely with the leadership at the state level, at both the executive branch as well as within the legislature, we have some receptive ears, and it's just a matter of putting some of that hard work in that goes into, explaining where the challenges are and where the opportunities might be. So,
see, that alone might be worth the price of admission to OITA. I think everyone who's listening to this broadcast, if you're in the state of Ohio and there are items like procurement, which is near and dear to us, but I'm sure you have your own, OITA would be a great mechanism to get a much broader voice at the state level than as an individual business, and actually get some material.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of our main value propositions, right? I mean, again, we're not going in as an organization advocating for any one company. That wouldn't be the right way to do it. But what we are advocating for is we're advocating for streamlining processes and opening up the door and being open to the potential for our members and other technology companies to have more of a chance to tell their story and to get their opportunities. And it's no doubt we're good at that. We have good, strong relationships. We've built that over many years, not just me, but many people who are on our team. And we've become, in many ways, a trusted advisor, and we guard that trust jealously, right? We don't come in and just sort of willy-nilly, make demands and challenge approaches. We try to have an ongoing dialogue, and what that does is it gives us an opportunity to be a stronger voice, ultimately on behalf of our members. But if you are, a company that's out there that's looking to engage with the state, looking to better understand the procurement process, we can certainly help with that. We'd encourage you to join and become part of what we're doing and add your voice to that discussion.
So, Nick, you mentioned that, states, the way they're procuring or the way they're operating to move them to operating at the speed of business is certainly a challenge, and it's a goal. But if we switch to cybersecurity, it's even moving faster than that. So if we look at what's happening in the private sector, at the government level, at the federal government level, and then at the state level, is there any kind of priority within the state of Ohio, you think, on looking at cybersecurity, and how would they what areas could they address? Because that's changing on a second by second basis, right?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, and you and I have talked about it before, whether it's the Russia hack or SolarWinds, and really trying to understand what the bad guys are doing out there, right? In terms of trying to focus on where's the weakest link, and attack those weakest links in a supply chain. And obviously, the state does business with a lot of companies, from around the state and the world, literally. And so I think one of the things that has happened, again, as a result of, whether it was more recently with as I mentioned, sort of the SolarWinds stuff and raising awareness, or last year there were a lot of small or mid-sized municipalities or townships, et cetera, who were getting hit with ransomware and things like that, and that really brought it to the forefront. And I do think there's some leadership at the state level which is recognizing that. As I mentioned, Innovate Ohio and their Cyber Ohio initiative really is to try to work not just for state government, but also with companies and put some public policy around some of that, some recommendations, some how-to or some best practices. And again, a great way to engage if you're in that sector, is to get involved with what we're doing and use our megaphone, so to speak, to better tell that story. Because while I think there's attention and there's importance placed on it, that is not a substitute for action and the comprehensive nature of what we need. And right. Those are the things that you guys are on the front line of, and really finding those ways to put words into action, to put insights into implementation, as we say at Transom, is really where I think we are in the process. And I think that, if we're not careful, we're going to have, some major issues. And ultimately, there's no government that wants to have to, respond to an attack where data's been breached or privacy's been impeded.
Data breaches and privacy are absolutely threatened, and they're of importance. But I think there's something of even much more greater importance, and that's protecting the infrastructure of the state. Right. So, Ted Koppel wrote a book called Lights Out several years ago, and he talks about how the national grid is, the power grid is very vulnerable, and he's absolutely right. And if you get a chance to read it, it's an easy read. It's a lighthearted read, but he makes some very good points. And I think at the state level, we know at the federal level, this is with all the partisanship going on, I don't know if we're going to see a movement in that arena. But it would be nice to see states start looking at their infrastructures and looking at how do we protect that from a cyber perspective, because they could probably do much more locally than what a federal initiative, if it ever comes about, would be able to do.
I agree with you, and I'm certainly not the cybersecurity expert that you are, or many of your listeners may be, but I can certainly see what is the tsunami of potential damage, right? That's coming. I feel like we're out in front of a wave right now. That wave is building. You see it from you see it both from what you call the sort of the business espionage factor, or the governmental, government to government, or just the the people who just want to wreak a little havoc, right? And that wave is building behind us, and we're out front of it to some extent, but with more, we talked a little bit about Transom and sort of the industrial automation, and we do a lot of, Internet of Things and things like that, and just, all those different touch points which now have vulnerability. And so if you think about it from the state perspective, there are a lot of different touch points that people, interact with the state, and whether that's infrastructure or their network, et cetera. I think the challenge for any state is, there's budgetary issues, there's constraints. Clearly, COVID has an impact on budget, and how are we going to do that? And maybe thinking about what are the creative solutions to solving some of those problems. So again, whether it's you guys at Dark Rhino or your broader audience or others out there, I would encourage you to get involved with what we're doing so we can start to address some of these things and bring these creative solutions. Because a lot of times, you don't know what you don't know, and that's true whether you're the governor or lieutenant governor or the state CIO. And they've been very open and receptive to our message, and are willing to be involved. So there's a lot more to do. There's no doubt, and we need bright minds and a lot of rolling up our sleeves and getting to work on it.
And Transom works in the industrial control systems. Have you seen a focus with ICSs on cybersecurity?
Yes, and again, I'm the entrepreneur, right? And in terms of the technical stuff, we've got a great team that we're working with. But a lot of the folks that we work with are large, manufacturing operations, right? The large car manufacturers or large industrial products manufacturers. And as we're, continuing to sort of advance their smart manufacturing capabilities, the threats and the potential for havoc, I guess, continue to grow. And there has been a, continued importance around that. And much of what we do, we ultimately end up partnering a lot of times with, more advanced cybersecurity firms to be kind of co-partners in some of our initiatives, because we've got a good team, but we don't have the depth that many of folks like yourself would have in terms of that. So we do see that. It's definitely a point of interest and a point of concern, and it is certainly from us, because as the consultants who are coming in helping to implement some of these changes, the last thing we want to do is be looked at and say, why didn't you think of that for us? Why didn't you talk to us about that? Why didn't you bring the right team behind you to raise this? So we feel an obligation to raise it, even if it's not being raised by our customers or clients.
There is a bit of a hot potato complex in cybersecurity when it comes to whether it's ICSs or at the state level or the federal government level, where everyone has been like, yeah, we know this is a problem, and let's toss it to the next guy. The problem with that, there's real world implications. I don't know if you remember the Trisis attack that happened at Saudi Aramco. It shut down that refinery, and that was a direct modification of their safety control system in the refinery. Now, thankfully, the guys who did it didn't know much about how the refinery operates, so they shut it down, which had an impact on global oil prices, but they didn't cause anybody to get hurt, if you will. No one was hurt in the process. You look at the Russian and Ukrainian issue, the Russians cyber hacked the Ukrainian grid, and they were able to shut power off in the country, right? And so there's some, we don't want to be in the United States in that situation where, the greedy guys who do ransomware, they're, worst case, you're going to pay them off. And that's just greed. But, people who are looking to do genuine harm to a population, that's a very different defense mindset. And getting folks out of that hot potato mentality, well, hang on to that hot potato, man, and someone's got to address it.
Well, and I think that's where you need, a coordinated effort. And it's not, you can't just put that on the state, because some of the things you're talking about, whether it's, the infrastructure, the grid, the electric grid or things like that. There's a state aspect to that. There's a federal aspect of it. There's a company aspect to that, which you well know. And I think the coordinated effort from what you consider sort of the cybersecurity side, the law enforcement side, all of those things are something that, from a greater public policy standpoint, I think are important to the state. From a protection standpoint, I think it's definitely we can't be throwing the hot potato around, no doubt. Somebody has to stop. We all have to sit in our musical chairs. Everybody has to have a chair and a seat at that table, and we've got to we got to try to solve that. Easier said than done, and unfortunately, a lot of times, it takes a crisis to create enough, awareness or enough, impetus to get it done. But again, I hate to keep going back to COVID, but COVID and just the fact that so much is being done, online, and so much is being done differently that you need protections for, even if it's just from a data privacy protection. That is where the state's involved. If you think about healthcare and some of the records and all the information that you provide, whether it's your taxes or your health information, to state agencies, that needs to be protected. So I think that the infrastructure issue is a critical one. It's a bigger one than any one state can address. And then some of the other stuff, at a closer to a more granular level to individuals is equally important, at least from a state perspective.
So, Nick, let me ask you this, just switching gears again a little bit. For 2021, where do you see the OITA policy initiatives going? Is there some hot areas that you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, as I said maybe at the beginning, OITA is a relatively young organization, right? We essentially got started a couple years ago. We kind of had a first big launch in November of 2019 in terms of an event, and then we got into 2020 and had a number of things planned, and then and COVID threw a wrench into all of our lives. So as an organization, which is really built around bringing people together, we had to adjust like everyone did, and we did that around several policy areas, and our virtual event series, which we did, and we're going to continue to do that. But things like broadband infrastructure, that's critical. Things around, because that addresses, there's a whole digital divide component to that. There's a whole sort of haves and haves not around those issues as well.
Is that so? If I could just pause you for a second on that. Is there really that big a divide? I mean, you think now you can walk down the street in Columbus and you're going to pick up public Wi-Fi from somewhere.
If you're walking downtown in Columbus, you're probably okay. If you're in certain suburban areas, you might be in a spot that just doesn't have it. Representative Carfagna, who has been part of one of our virtual event series, he talks about, he lives in a nice neighborhood in a suburb of the Columbus area, and there are spots in his neighborhood where certain houses, don't have the same level of connectivity that other houses down the street do. And then if you're talking about some of the rural areas or the urban areas, you definitely have pockets and large pockets where there just really is not the bandwidth and the connectivity. And so why that's so important, besides just the fact that, hey, we want to have faster internet speed so we can, download and stream Netflix, right? That's not it. What we're talking about is, as we look to do more teleeducation, more telehealth, more, online and remote working. If we don't have that infrastructure in place, that eliminates, millions, literally millions of people in the state of Ohio from the ability to effectively compete or take advantage or reduce the cost that are associated with that technology. And so, while if you live in the big three, the three C's, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, and you're downtown where there's a lot of business, operations and things like that, sure, you're fine, right? If you live in the suburbs of many communities where I live, sure, I'm fine. There's not that same level of access in many urban areas and many rural areas throughout the state, and that's an issue that we need to address.
I learned something new today.
Yeah, and Yeah, and in terms of other issues, I mean, we've got, everything from, we've got events that we're talking about from a 5G standpoint and what that means. We're talking about areas around education and workforce development in our tech talent sector. We've got, things around cybersecurity. We've talked about that a fair amount today, but we've got initiatives there where we're working with both the executive branch and the legislative branch on issues with respect to that. So I think that, going forward, we're going to stay involved in the broad cross-section that we're already involved in. As I mentioned, we're member-driven, so the things that are most important to our members ultimately bubble up to the top and give us a reason to engage. We'll continue to provide a number of, of virtual events. We'll do some educational forums. When we're able to, we'll start to get back in person and connecting people. We're focused on our procurement reform, and we've got a set of recommendations that we've put forward to the state on that. We're going to continue to push there. But what I would say, Manoj, is, the thing that we're trying to do is we're trying not to just be an organization that talks about or reports on the needs of the state or the needs of our members, but really get in there, roll up our sleeves, get our hands a little bit dirty, take an initiative, put a stake in the ground and get something done. Because that's really, that's the success. It's not really about talking about what we do. We're going to look back, I hope to look back many years from now and be able to point to the things we accomplished. Not that we built a big organization, but that we accomplished things with that big organization. And so that what I'm looking to do for 2021 is really a breakout year for OITA. Our goal is to, drive membership, get more people involved, more people in the discussion, and really start to put a stake in the ground on some of these important issues, across the spectrum of technology to allow companies to grow and thrive here.
You've taken up a huge cause, Nick. That's a big challenge. And I think, OITA's success is going to rest in the membership getting engaged. I mean, you've put together a great platform and you have the contacts in the year, the state. We need, as individual members, to engage heavily and push on those topics, and that's the only way. I think a lot of people think you join an association and then the association does all the work. I don't believe that's the best way that people they need to get involved.
That's certainly not the model that I wanted to follow. Right, I've been involved in a lot of organizations. I've served on a lot of boards. Everything from a major university to small, nonprofit boards. But in starting one and thinking about what this what this organization can and should be, it really was about being member driven. It's not going to be Nick York who gets all that stuff done. It's going to be all of us collectively working together. If we can provide, or I can provide, some, the platform, as you said, and the connectivity, great. That's the role that we can play. We're not looking to reinvent a wheel. We need member participation. We want your good ideas. We want your insights, and we want you to be successful in growing your organization, your business, whatever it is that you're involved in, whatever is your passion. We're going to help facilitate that and get that done. That's how we'll be successful as a collective and doing it together, not by a small group of staff members at an association.
I couldn't agree with you more, and hopefully we'll have a lot more folks joining us this year. Now, Nick, I know we're coming up on the hour here, and before we part ways, I wanted to, of course, thank you for doing this. I think it's very important. But also, do you have any events coming up or anything you'd like to plug in terms of the new?
Yeah, we're in the planning process right now of a number of events. So we're working on a 5G event. We're working on a tech talent event. We're working on a tech disruption, which is kind of a broad, innovation and technology, both in the public and private sector. We're looking at events around smart mobility and talking with various both state and local governments and the private sector on smart mobility. So we don't have something planned right now that I can give you the date on, but actually that's a good opportunity for your listeners. If you've got interest in the organization and in some of the events that I mentioned, we're in the formative stages of those, and we'll be rolling that out for the second part of the first quarter, and then a number of events on a monthly or even a bi-monthly basis going forward. So if there's interest, I would encourage all of your listeners to get involved with what we're doing, share your ideas, and help us craft what's important to you, and find ways to work together here.
Absolutely. We will link up in the show notes the website for OITA and on LinkedIn, and we'll link back to you as well, Nick, your personal profile, and put the emails in. Hopefully Rose won't get too mad with getting
we'll get it done.
We'll get this information out there, but we'll make sure that it's all in the show notes so that folks, if you're listening, you'll just be able to click on the link and be able to get to the OITA. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We all greatly appreciate it, and thanks for taking up such a noble cause.
It was my pleasure, and I look forward. My door's open, my phone rings, and my email's available. So for those out there who are interested, when you get that information, if you've got questions, reach out. Let's work together. I think we can accomplish great things if we can do it together. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.